Welcome, everybody. This is Daniel Stein from Stewards of Change, and welcome to the weekly Let's Get Technical call. A couple of things to get started. One thing is, if you're on a phone only, if you can go in and actually put your name, I think you have the option to put your name in. If you click on yourself, or if you're on the screen, I think you can just rename your number so we know who it is. That's calling it. It helps it for the conversation to see the voice. Also, when you make comments, it's good to just introduce yourself for a second, so we know who the comment's coming from. Some voices are more familiar than others. And then finally, if you are so daring, feel free to use this newfangled video technology and let us see your smiling face. It makes it a more congenial conversation. So, and you get extra points for putting your camera on, of course. So hopefully you'll abide us there. So we're gonna, as I said, we already got started. So one of the two things I want to do is just to recognize new people on the call or folks who have come back for a bit. The way we figured out how to do this is if you just if you go to the chat function on the menu bar and you just type in your name, and then what I'll do is I'll just call on you, and you can tell us who you are, kind of what you're involved with, and just a few words about what you're involved with and what you're doing, just so we get an orientation. We've had continuing new people come to the calls every week, so it's good for the people who have been showing up. So feel free to go to chat, put your name in, and we'll just call on you. So now would be a good time to start to do that. Anybody new?
I'm new, Eric Kruger.
Oh, great. Hey, Eric.
I'm from the Department of Health, Washington State. I'm an enterprise data architect, and I just joined the MPI project on last week because I'm involved in identical effort at the state level with social services, health benefits, Department of Health, and other agencies. And so we're setting about to solve that problem.
Excellent, excellent. Well, welcome. We'll be hearing about that a bunch more. And for everybody on the phone, of course, there's more information on the NIC website and on the project, and we can talk more about that as we go forward. Great. We've got a couple other folks up here. Andrew Lang. If you're not speaking, you can put yourself on mute as well. That's great. There's a little background noise, so that'd be great. Andrew, welcome.
Hi, everybody. It's been maybe a couple months since my last call. I have been with the state of Vermont for the last 7 years and just switched positions to Lantana Consulting Group that has a long history with healthcare information exchange, quality standards, and specifically fire that I'm hoping to bring to bear to this conversation.
Welcome. Thanks for joining us here in your new incarnation, Andrew. Great to have you. Great to have you on board here. Jane Persig.
Yes, hello. I'm Jane Persig, and I'm from the Alliance for Strong Families and Communities. I actually have been working for the past 20 years with Advocate Aurora Health in Milwaukee, Illinois, in their social service organization. So Aurora Family Service joined a healthcare system in 1995. In the past 19 years, I've worked with the integration. So in my next role, seeing what that looks like from the inside out and outside in at the same time. Been looking to continue to support our members in making that move with as partnership as a community-based organization with healthcare. So I'm part of the committed members on the Gravity Project.
Oh, great.
I noted the subject here. I am a social worker by design, so I'm really here to absorb your all best thinking and maybe understand a little more and maybe contribute to implementation, particularly since that's my bailiwick.
Fantastic, great. Great to know that you're part of Gravity, and great to know that Illinois is here as well. So welcome as well. And and welcome to the Alliance.
I have to add, it's Illinois and Wisconsin. I probably have my Packers t-shirt on right now.
Wait, I didn't, there's an Illinois, Wisconsin? Okay, great. I guess that's like the Paris, Texas for folks. Same kind of thing. Well, welcome. Good to learn that. Helen Hill, welcome.
Thank you. Glad to be back.
Great. Helen, where are you from? Just so everyone knows.
Oh, sorry. Sorry, I'm from Ann Arbor, Michigan. I have a number of roles. I run a small HIE. I'm on the state board for the Health Information Exchange, MyHIN, and I represent the Michigan chapter of HIMSS and a number of initiatives. Have a long and diverse background in development, consulting, and interoperability.
Excellent. Great. Thank you, Helen. Atul.
Hi, I'm Atul Verma from New Jersey Institute of Technology. I just recently started this role 3 weeks ago. I'm the enterprise architect for various solutions and working on New Jersey Health Information Network. So NJII is the state designated entity for NJHIN. And we are currently working on improving the MPI project and also looking at different consent options. So yeah, I heard about this, so I'm interested to learn more about it.
One thing I'll mention for folks who are new to the group, hopefully you've gone to the National Interoperability Collaborative, you've gone to the group that's the Let's Get Technical. When you sign in, you have to sign in. The more information you want to put on there about what you're doing, what you're interested in, the more the more valuable it is to other people as we're looking at sort of sharing across the various domains and participants. So feel free to fill out your profile as well there as possible. So that would be great. So I also have a note from Melanie Epstein Corbin from California Department of Public Health. Her note in the chat to everyone, you can see there, she's having a little trouble with the audio. You may want to try to call back in if it's another option there for you. She is the electronic case reporting coordinator for California, and been participating in the electronic CR pilot by the CDC and others there. So welcome, Melanie. And if your audio doesn't get better, then obviously feel free to continue with the chat. Elliot, welcome.
Good morning, everybody from snow in Colorado. I put a quick catch-up note in there for you that we're going to hopefully be moving forward via UNESCO's what would you call them, commissioners for various of the countries that were there into the UN to say how important it is for data between healthcare, human services, education to be part of what's being looked at when learning analytics are used in various countries. So it was like they got to hear all about what we're doing.
Awesome. That is great. That ties to one of the presentations we have coming up in a couple of weeks. So thank you. That maybe we can connect the dots there as well.
Yeah.
Great. Mary Sarah Jones, welcome again.
Thank you.
Great. Anyone else new to the group that wants to say hello and where your origins are from?
Hi, this is Josh Rubin. I'm with the University of Michigan Medical School and the Cancer Foundation. I'm actually based in the Washington, D.C. area. I work on learning health systems, and I'm also the facilitator for the Opioid Prevention Forum on the NIC Hub.
Welcome, Josh. Great. Anyone else? Great. Okay. All right then. So welcome to everybody. And so what we're going to do, I'm just going to show you what's coming up in the next couple of weeks. We've been working on a calendar. And then we're going to dive into the project patient client matching proof of concept. And we have our three presenters, Dave Walsh, who's a co-lead on the Let's Get Technical, Pradeep Padilla, who's an informatics fellow at the CDC and Denver Health, and Rita I'm not gonna do your name well.
Torxiday.
Torxiday, there you go. Just on the tip of my tongue there, who have been working offline and between meetings to sort of further the conversations we've been having about both the patient matching, person matching, and the proof of concept. And then we'll finish up on some other kinds of things there. So just one thing I'm happy to report. Again, if you're not on mute, please go ahead and put yourself on mute. There's a little background noise, people scratching around on the desk. That would be great. Thank you. Okay, so here's a calendar of what we're attempting to put together for us. One of the things we really want to do is have a calendar reaching out at least a month or two or even more around topics of interest that have come up in the conversation, and as we look at the group to both expand our knowledge of different domains, as well as specific projects that are related to or connected to the work that and the conversations we've been having here. And so this is a list. You'll see there's still a number of TBDs, but what we do have is starting on October 25th, Paul Warmley, who is the Executive Director Emeritus of IGES Institute and also an SOC board member, will be presenting some on one of the domains, one of the 6 domains we focus on, which is public safety. The following week, Evelyn Gallego has offered to provide an update on the Gravity Project. So for those of you who are involved in listening, we'll be able to dive a little more deeply into that as well. So, and then the following week is so Dave Ross, for those of you who may be familiar with him. I'm going to put everybody on mute. There's a little bit too much background noise there. Okay, hopefully, can you hear me? You can't. Okay, great. So Dave Ross, who's part of the Public Health Informatics Institute and runs the Gates Task Force for Global Health, is going to be with us on November 8th around what they're doing in the Global Health Initiative. I've known Dave for a bunch of years from some of the Robert Wood Johnson work we did together. And he just brings a font of information, been around for a long time, and is interested in sharing with us some of the interoperability work that's going on outside of the United States, outside of our boundaries. So there's some interesting, exciting stuff there. And then what's coming up, we're working on dates to hear more about Family First Prevention Act, which is vital to the foster care and child welfare world. And then we have a number of other ones we're working on from a public health and social determinants of health perspective. And as you can see through that, a number of other topics. We want your thoughts and feedback on that. So later on in the call today, or as we go forward, we'll have some more discussion around that. And if there are other conversations or other topics that are of interest to folks that would be beneficial, we'll add them to it. And we'll kind of go back and forth between sort of deeper conversations about particular domains or projects, and then sort of these cross-cutting, synchronized kinds of efforts like we'll be talking about today. How do we link across different initiatives to keep people engaged and interested, in how we sync this work together, which is in some ways, the core of what we're doing at the NIC, and all of you are participating, is how do we cut across those health, human services, public health, education worlds to be able to synchronize that stuff, so we're not recreating the wheel all the time, all over the place there. So so that's what I've got here for you. We'll be posting this on the site, and so you can adjust your calendars. And just want to, I guess, sort of apology for inundating you with a lot of notifications. We just want to make sure you're getting it, but we'll modulate our outreach, especially if you have them on your calendar. We won't need to do as much of that. And of course, you can always consult the website for more information and posting of documents with that. So with that, if there are any questions or comments, I just unmuted everybody, so know that there's got stuff going on, we can hear you. If there's any comments or questions right now, a great time to kind of raise those topics.
Oh, this is Marcy. I have a quick one. Do we have someone from the Sequoia Project coming? They just had their first kickoff call, and that's one with the, they're the RCE, designated RCE with the ONC.
Oh, you know what? That's an important point. They were on here, and I know that they had a call on Monday. So one of the questions is, do we want to invite them to present to this group? I certainly can do that and add them back on. I think that's a great suggestion.
I think it's helpful.
Okay. Any other immediate suggestions or thoughts? Okay, so we're ready to sort of move into the next section here, which will be a kind of a review of the Project Unity and person matching introduction program. And Dave, I'm going to hand that off back to you. And I think Pradeep is back on and Rita's on the call. So you guys want to set it up a little bit from the conversations we've had previously. And so take it away.
Sure. Yeah, this is Dave Walsh. So we started this person matching a couple of months ago, and it was interesting. It started out as more or less the traditional person matching, and I think Eric said he's getting involved in it now. One of the things that we saw that really stands out is when you try and do person matching across domains, and I think cross domains is clearly in our future as it is in many people's, but it adds a great deal of complexity to the whole problem of person matching. So I would like to just ask questions. Is anybody out there really involved in the cross-domain aspect of person matching?
Yeah, Dave, it's Mary Sarah Jones. We have several projects that are doing cross-domain. So they've got social, health, and corrections.
Mm-hmm.
So those three domains coming together.
Eric Kruger at DOH. We're connecting social services, health benefits exchange, healthcare authority, Department of Social Services, and Department of Children, Youth, and Families, with the anticipation that it's scalable to other domains also.
So question for both Mary Sarah and Eric. In those activities, do you actually have control of some unique identifier so that when you try and pull the information across domains, you can resolve it to one individual, or do you not have control over having a unique identifier?
I can answer that. Oh, go ahead.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
So we have no control over a single identifier, and I don't anticipate, even if we did have control over a central identifier, by the time we master that, there would be something new, and so we need a solution better than a single identifier.
I completely agree with Eric. I think trying to go with the single identifier is what ends up causing us problems, especially across domains. And we need to go more toward a resolution of identity as opposed to matching by that unique identifier. And that's a little bit more complicated, but I don't think, I mean, it's not rocket science, and it's something that is not a point in time accuracy. It allows you to be accurate today and tomorrow. And even as names change over time, you know, as we have different people moving around, we get different influxes of naming styles. So it can adapt to that. Unique identifiers tend to be a point in time accuracy. So, I would urge to stay away from that approach.
Gotcha. So at some point, and I want to give Pradeep enough time to talk here, but at some point, I'd love to have a little bit deeper conversation there as to how that actually works when you have little control over the domains that you're matching across. The other thing that I guess is a question that I have you seen much in terms of utilization of APIs to accomplish that? So I'm taking that as a no.
Can you say more about what you mean by that? I mean, the data is coming in via APIs.
Yeah, so the question really is, when you go to do the cross-domain name matching, and it's a new system that you want to be able to match across or match with, is it then an integration effort to get into that new system and so forth? And so I guess two questions. One is that integration effort substantial? And could you envision an API or a touch point to say any system that is going to be doing this cross-domain matching, or that you're going to be cross-domain matching to, is it possible to have that surface and application programming interfaces to lessen the burden of the integration that has to occur?
The answer is yes. Application program interfaces are good, but our strategy is to not do deep integration, because deep integration means we have to change all of our systems substantially. We're looking at providing an interoperability model that's not integration. Integration is you're gluing things together hard. We're envisioning more of a statewide registry where everyone publishes their data, and then that data is correlated, abstracted from all those other applications, if that makes sense.
Yes.
So integration means the more integration you do, it's a lot of work. We want to create a model that's a little bit more flexible.
Yeah. So where are you at, Eric, in that process?
We're at the very, very start. We're just doing funding and project initiation. And so we've only done visionary documents, nothing operational.
Well, so Eric, I'm sorry, Dave.
Go ahead, Pradeep. I'm sorry.
No, thank you. Thank you. So Eric, thank you. That information was very helpful. So is it more like creating some kind of a common data model structure to which all the participating entities will be sharing their data? So conforming to the common data model?
Correct.
Okay. Thank you, Eric. Thank you.
Yeah, this is Mary Sarah again. In my experience is we haven't had control over the source system, so the incoming data, and we've been asked actually not to require any changes to those legacy systems. So we do use APIs to bring the data in. The complexity of that is often determined by how old the systems are. You know, when we get into some 20 and 30-year-old systems, you might have to be a little creative. The modern ones are a different matter. And then I think within a services layer, there's some ability to do that semantic operability. So instead of changing the data in that legacy system and having everybody conform to a common model, there's an ability to map what it means to one agency to what that term means to another agency, so that by the time all the data comes together, that it has a common meaning and everybody knows what homelessness means when they see it in that context.
Gotcha. That was helpful.
Thank you.
That was very well
helpful.
said. The words we use here, and it's probably too complex, is semantic interoperability.
Yep. Yep.
I don't try to say
That
that
was
too much when I'm executives because
Too many syllables.
Absolutely. That was very helpful, and something I just wanted to put it out there as we are talking about this is when it comes to pediatric patient matching, sometimes since pediatric patients will not have financial transaction information, so how many of you have actually dealt with this problem or exploring this, and how often have you seen parents' information also documented on the child's medical record? Because my understanding, and please correct me if I'm saying something wrong, is due to security and confidentiality related issues, the parent information may be delinked from the pediatric medical chart after a certain time or after a certain time point. For example, if it's a newborn, that information may be there. My understanding is it may be there for the first 15 days or maybe for the first 6 months to take care of any medication-related information or any medical issues related information. But after some point, have you noticed that the parent's information is being delinked from the child's or pediatric information?
From a public health standpoint, immunization registries certainly focus a lot on children's records, and parents and guardian records are, or parents and guardian segments are commonly collected from EHRs and stored within immunization registries. And that information, actually there's a lot of work done to keep that information current within the laws and regulations of a jurisdiction. Some affect those records differently when a child becomes 18 or sometimes 19. But generally, the parent and guardian information persists in a public health registry for some time.
Thank you, Noam. Thank you.
This day, one question just came up before we dive into the next part of it. It's from Naresh. Your question, Naresh, is about data governance issues. And I'm assuming that you're talking about data governance between the various domains or programs or agencies that are sharing or attempting to identify people between them or to share information.
Yeah, so my specific question, let me be clear about it. So that's to Eric, I guess. When you're creating a common data model and you intend to persist data on that, how do you deal with data governance issue? For example, I work with PDMP. We are not allowed to give our data outside to store to any other entity. And it's by the law. So how do you deal when you have a common data model that needs persistent other sources?
Was that a question to Eric?
Yes.
A lot of that data sharing and who can see what really needs to be addressed through laws and regulations, because many of our laws right now prevent that. And so the governance is going to have to come up with a solution for it, because that's an impediment.
That's interesting. We've been trying to deal with that too. And for certain reasons we cannot change law. So yeah.
So we deal with data privacy issues based upon a tiered structure of access controls. So first, limiting information based upon a person's role and what organization they belong to. And then on top of that, layering privacy restrictions based upon attributes within the data. And that information can either be locked down at a database level, it can be locked down at a master data management level. And that way the data never actually, it's not that it's masked, it never gets pulled through. So it's never presented to the user. And then on top of that, we layer consent. So if the client consents to an umbrella type consent that you would use, let's say, for coordinated care, then that unlocks some of the data, but we also don't share all the data. The data that is shared is based upon always what's going to help the user to make better decisions. Otherwise, we get into kind of like the internet issue where when you get 200 million hits, it's not really any more helpful than getting 20.
That's very helpful. Thank you.
Okay, great. So that's a good start of the conversation here. I know Rita and Pradeep and Dave, you might want to just say a little bit about the, as we, sort of the framing between person matching and the POC and what we're hoping to accomplish in terms of actually trying to operationalize something over the next period of time. And then we can dive into Pradeep's specifics here.
So did you, I'm just a little confused here, Daniel. Do you want to go to my slides or do you want Pradeep to do a deeper dive at this point?
Well, I thought it would be useful just to sort of update folks on the fact that we, talked about a POC around around some of this work, and then sort of connecting with the person matching, and then either go to Pradeep's work or to the part that you want to do first, whatever is the most relevant given the conversation we've just had.
Yeah, so I'm going to leave that up to you, Pradeep. If it was up to me, I would jump into some slides on the POC and discuss where person matching falls into that effort.
That would be great, Dave, if you can give that overall context for the
yeah, that'd be great. Yep.
Okay, so Dave, I can forward it on then to the beginning of the slides here.
Okay.
You're good?
Yep. So people who have been on the call for a while are somewhat familiar with this, and it is something that we're calling Project Unify, and it's just to kind of give it a home, if you will, where we can look at being able to integrate, if you will, microservices together to make solutions. And to me, it very much seems like microservices is where the IT industry is going. Not exclusively, but it's becoming more and more dominant. And if you look at the top of this screen, it really speaks to being able to have microservices to interface with or to provide the functionality of any given domain. For example, it could be an HIE or an EHR or a justice system, TANF, community-based organizations and so forth, but they're kind of, you can think of them as Lego blocks that you can clip together to make a unified system. And there are capabilities underneath of there that allow data to flow in and out of these services. And there's technologies such as OAuth, which we see down here, OpenID Connect and so forth, which allows you to access information on each one of these domains up here. So what we're looking at doing is collaborating with others. In my background, I come out of healthcare, and there's a big move in healthcare at this point to focus in on standards like FHIR. There's going to be, FHIR stands for Fast Healthcare Interoperability Resources. FHIR is going to be an important factor when it comes to integrating components of a healthcare system. We've had discussions in the past where we've certainly said that FHIR is not going to be the answer to everything. Even on this slide here, when we're talking about integration with justice, they are fairly advanced on the NIM, National Information Exchange Model standards. So it's different than the FHIR standards, but one of the things that we're looking at exploring is how can the underlying technologies like OAuth, OpenID Connect, and so forth, how can they be utilized on both NIM transactions, because NIM is fundamentally about the data model, and NIM doesn't reference the transport, how you get the data from point A to point B. It doesn't allow for any security mechanisms, and FHIR in fact does. It allows you to use technologies generally called SMART that allow you to specify who is allowed to see which records, and furthermore, what can that particular user do to that information? Can they just read it? Can they update it? And so forth. So we're looking at how we can use or reuse some of that healthcare initiative, because there's going to be a substantial amount of funding in the healthcare world. And how can we reuse that into the human services space, as an example? So the goal of this Project Unify is tying many of these domains together and reusing as much as possible. So the specific area of healthcare that I focus on primarily is Medicaid. And if anybody has put up a Medicaid MMIS system or a Medicaid enterprise, you know it's extremely expensive, extremely complex. And when you look at services that may be needed from community-based organizations, for example, they're not going to have the funding available to be able to implement anything like a Medicaid system. So the goal here is, how can we develop these services, these microservices, that would allow us to reuse what has been implemented in the past and just modify it to a degree so it is not a mammoth project. And just like Mary Sarah Jones was saying a little bit ago, we need to find ways that reduce the level of integration that needs to occur. We need to make it more agile, more accessible to individuals. Let me ask a quick side question. Tom Sebelius, did you happen to make it to the call?
Yeah, I'm here, Dave.
Okay. Tom has worked with us in the Medicaid space for a few years now, and Tom is really, if you will, our chief storyteller. He does a good job of understanding what the scenarios are in the different domains and can come up with use cases or user stories that paint a realistic picture. Over the last couple of years, Tom had put together a couple of stories. Tom, do you feel comfortable with just kind of summarizing the last 2 years?
Yeah, so we've been kind of building from a foundation with the help of partners like Mayan and others. To kind of curate, if you will, a set of patients, a set of conditions, a set of circumstances by which certain scenarios and proofs of concept can be demonstrated. And so we started with a single mother who has a child. Basically, we started with an opioid-based scenario where she basically, the mother's in a court-ordered medication-assisted treatment plan. And we added certain sweeteners to that, like interoperability across state lines and things like that. But since our audience so far has been largely addressing the Medicaid population, that's been sort of a focus element. In subsequent demonstrations, we've attempted to sort of cross domains with the story and basically leveraging some of the same patients, care team. Yeah, that's another important aspect of this, that one of the things that we've been using sort of as a central theme is the places where care coordination, care management, and care teams that are not just health providers can collaborate electronically as opposed to the current mechanisms that often involve faxing things back and forth. So the notion of care plans and care teams has been sort of a central theme so far. But we've since expanded into more the social determinants of health issues, trying to get more cross-sector data sharing into the mix. And so we've been kind of expanding on our story, putting our characters into interesting circumstances where such data exchanges would take place. Does that make sense?
It does. So one of the things that we had found, and Tom, like I said, has been working on this for a couple of years now. It really, with the user story out there, it goes a long way in terms of communicating to people why you're implementing this technology to really solve a user's problem. And one of the things that we have been successful with, if you look at the upper right and the box next to it here, we have been working with the Michigan Health Information Exchange, and they've got an initiative that they're working on that should be going into beta very soon, something called Interoperability Land. But it's a pretty rich set of capabilities that are about primarily fire or healthcare exchanges of information. It also contains personas to go along with the user story and so forth. But this group is going to be continuing to work with the MyHIN group, the Michigan Health Information Exchange, to leverage services that they already have. And it's important to note that we're not trying to build a product per se. The vast majority of what we're talking about, such as Care Nexus, which is the backbone of a lot of the work that we did on care management and so forth, is an open source project. So the goal here is to identify patterns that can be reused across these services and hopefully developed in a way that makes them fairly easy to knit together using APIs to be able to cross these different domains. So that's one aspect, and it will be Fire-based. It will be able to access or manage NEAM information as well. And the goal here on the back end side is to help to educate the community on what these standards are and how to implement them. As I was saying, a lot of it is going to be open source, and we're not trying to build a quote product. We're trying to build a proof of concept so people can learn more about how to build these microservices to construct a complex system out of those. So if you take a look at the top side of this graph, when you're looking across domains, all of a sudden pretty quickly you can see where cross-domain name matching becomes a very relevant piece of it. So if what you're trying to do, and this is one of the scenarios that Tom has worked on and we intend to go deeper on it, is if you have to go across EHR domains or HIE domains with justice because the individual got in trouble and he needs a parole officer on the case involved in the care management as well. So as we start to go across these domains, it should be pretty obvious that you need to have some kind of cross-domain name matching. And that's where my questions earlier on come into focus with either having APIs or something else that's integratable into these domains so you can do the cross-domain matching. Eric, are you still with us?
Yes, I'm still here.
So question to you, is this making sense, having, if you will, domains that are reflected by APIs, microservices that you can match between those domains? Is that making any sense to you?
It makes 100% sense. It just gets more and more complicated as the number of players increase and the number of standards that you need to be interoperable with increases.
Yeah, yeah.
So Dan, this is Daniel. I have a question. I just want to open it up a little bit. As we're talking about, it kind of laid out a vision for this. What are you thinking about? Pradeep and Rita join in here as well. When we talk about a proof of concept, it's really to demonstrate something that can be used and built on. So clearly, there's only, not all the domains up here. There's not education up here. There's not public health necessarily up here as well, others as well. But can you talk a little bit about sort of what the contours of this might look like? So is it between two different domains? Is it broader than that? Is it, how do we bring people into it so it's relevant to them and yet demonstrate something that is useful, not only, useful broadly across across the network and across the country, maybe for that matter.
Yeah.
Daniel, this
yeah,
is Pradeep. Yeah, go ahead.
Go ahead.
I was going to say this, Tom. I can tell you kind of how we've done it, building on the Might Attack work.
Yeah.
And it's really kind of a collaborative selection process. I mean, most of the time, by the time we get the story together, there's hardly any time to build much of anything. so if we put 10 subjects in the box, we, weighed down to maybe 2 as what's achievable. But we always try to incorporate things that the group finds as a whole to be of interest and relevant to the issues that are being talked about, the current affairs that are on people's minds. The opioid thing was very relevant at the time when we started there. The cross-domain data sharing, social determinants of health subjects. As I mentioned, the cross-state boundaries data sharing was important to one of our constituents, so we basically threw that in there and made it happen. So it's an iterative effort, and it's collaborative in terms of the issues of the day and what people believe is relevant and timely. So, I mean, one scenario, for example, that we've thrown out on this call in recent weeks is the notion of the cross-domain area, specifically where fire and NEAM as 2 different standard sets may need to coexist in a data sharing environment in a health and human services scenario. So the sort of theory, if you will, of a proof of concept that we started with was, what if you could use the consent mechanism of fire, of Smart on Fire, because we have apps that work in that area already, maybe be able to concoct a scenario where you may have need for records that live in the fire world and records that live in the NEAM world, and could you use the same transport security layer to do that? And just taking that as sort of an initial example, what we would do is we would build an entire story around that feels relevant, both in terms of where the data needs to go. We look at things like we've been careful to choose even the states we're in because of various statutory limits. We don't want to present something that is basically statutorily precluded. Say you're doing something in Ohio, and we know that's illegal in Ohio. We don't want to go on the stage and say that, right? So it's a collaborative process, and it usually takes several iterations. But by the time what we've done so far, I think, David, I think you might agree that what we've come up with so far has been pretty hardened by the time it gets to the stage.
Yes. So one of the things that we're trying to accomplish here is, by taking groups like the Michigan Health Information Network, who have a lot of production savvy in terms of these sorts of services, utilize them, get them involved in it to help educate the rest of us who may not have as much background in how you build these services and what the standards look like and so forth. So Pradeep, was there something that you or Rita would like to mention about the cross-domain person sharing as indicated by the top row of blocks?
Sure, absolutely. Something that we would like to add is the use case that we have been thinking about, which involves more than 2 domains. And as the previous on the call has mentioned, it's like a collaborative effort, or it's collaborative selection process which goes through multiple iterations. Something that went into the thought process is just like the previous caller has mentioned, that it depends on the value proposition as well as what are the hot topics. For example, opioids is one of the cases that was selected for cross-domain matching. For the case of cross-domain matching that we are looking in the context of this client matching, something that we took a different spin for that. The different spin is we're trying to look at the different basic building blocks that are involved in everyone's life, which is like healthcare, education, as well as housing. Those are the 3 domains that were selected as a part of this use case so that we could get some feedback from the call participants today. So, and also to add a challenging dynamic to it, that was one of the reasons why I was asking about the pediatric patient population at the beginning of this call. So we're thinking about a use case that involves the user story, Dave, as you mentioned earlier, also on the call, which is the value proposition. So what is the value proposition that will attract people to this patient or client matching across domains? So, and also adding the challenging dynamics of pediatric patient population, it's the user story is to look at healthcare utilization of an asthmatic kid and absenteeism related to that individual because of the exacerbations related to asthma, depending on the environmental or social determinants of health, which is the housing condition. So those are the 3 domains that were selected for this idea use case or the proof of concept so that we could get some feedback from the participants.
Yeah, actually, that's interesting that you should say that. Is it Pradeep? Is that how you pronounce your name?
Yes.
Because actually, the data that we have curated right now from last year's Medicaid conference is almost exactly on point with that. We have a single mother and a child. In fact, we demonstrated a situation where the kid had asthma, and the mother was living in very poor, she had asthma. And so they did an asthma home visit and the home conditions, and they basically brought that back into the school nurse and the pediatrician, and the kid had some behavioral health issues as well relative to his mother's opioid addiction. So we had complex patients. We had an asthmatic condition in the home. We had all those kind of things to start from. So this sounds good as something to build on.
Sure. Thank you so much. Thank you.
So this is Rita.
Sure. Go ahead, Rita.
The only thing that I would add, and this is in part going back to the question that Naresh asked about data governance, is that I think regardless of which domain we're talking about, whether it's justice or healthcare or what have you, I mean, particularly when it comes to things like children's health records, I think data governance is gonna be like one of those thorns that may keep poking us or pop out when we're not really thinking about it, because I know with PDMPs, and somebody mentioned this, there's issues with what's going to be shared or what a particular PDMP may share based on either their local policies or state issues. I mean, Carmen's pretty familiar with this because she recently did that patient matching PDMP day-long conference. So I don't know, Carmen, if you'd want to chime in more particular on that particular issue, but I do think data governance is something that we might want to pay more attention to, and how we like also approach the use cases across the different domains.
Want to chime in, Carmen?
I think she's on.
Don, she may.
Maybe unmute.
Maybe. No. Sometimes there's difficulty with the audio, but
yeah.
If you are, Carmen, you can join us there.
So
also, this might help.
Hi.
Go ahead, Mike.
Oh, this is Naresh again. So along those lines, I do like the approach of what you brought here, a microservices platform-based approach where you could leverage any kind of patient matching algorithm so that the data resides where it has to reside, and we could use such an architecture to leverage those data governance issues that might come along.
That's a good point.
Absolutely. And another important thing that comes in this context is, as we are dealing with multiple domains, how do we facilitate the building of the common data model? What are the elements that get into this common data model? So that's another thing that we need to keep in mind as we plan to explore this this dynamic of cross-domain patient matching or client matching.
Yeah, and I think that some of the, I don't know if Brian from Book Zerman is on the call, but that's kind of what we've experienced in the past is, we usually have something, we're not starting from scratch, I guess. We're through open source means or whatever we have available to us. There are things available to us in the environment already that we can work with. And the proof of concept becomes then, how do we tweak those things to make this scenario work?
Right, like leveraging the existing infrastructures. Absolutely, I totally agree with you.
Indeed, this is Brian Hanspicker. We do have a picture, a more technical architecture layer diagram for Project Unify that breaks out things like data modeling and patient matching as individual microservices. But we also have, in addition to the open source work that Brian Book has done and the MITA folks have done, we also have a good deal of work that's been done through NIM Health and through the ONC's work on a federal health information model for helping to map between healthcare standards and human services standards.
That stuff is all very helpful, and I think we're also going to want some of the, by the time we're done, we're probably going to want some of the implementation guides from Da Vinci.
Yes.
The stuff like that. One of the things, and we probably don't have one, we'll probably have to make one out of the various pieces, parts that we've got here. We like to match the story with a specific interaction diagram to basically understand all of the flows that are part of the demo. Because one of the things that we run into, as they say, no plan has ever survived contact with the enemy. And we run into that too, where you got 10 things that have to happen, data that has to move or an API that has to be accessed or something, and you really only have time to build or show 3 of them, then some of those things become stipulated to. It's kind of liken it to a cooking show. You stir up some ingredients and then you put it in the oven and then you open the oven and pull one out that's already completed, right? Some of those kind of moves to accomplish the demo, and we usually restrict those to things that are, I'll call them the well-worn paths through things like health information exchange. We try to focus on the things that are net new and different, and where there's a traditional health information exchange, for example, we may stipulate to that as opposed to actually show it. But it's really about what we're able to achieve by the time. It depends on which conference we're going to and how much time we have. And a lot of other factors. But we usually get something together that's meaningful.
The challenge, but also the good thing, is that for any scenario that you can come up with, any big picture story you can come up with, there are multiple different users playing multiple different roles, each of which has its own specific user story that needs to be developed out in detail, such as each of the players, each of the actors below clouds in the picture on the screen. But that doesn't mean we have to necessarily define a user story for each user, each role that participates in the overall scenario, in order to at least get started by defining the user story for one user and one role.
Right. And we've done it both ways. We've done kind of one person's story as an encounter through a collection of interactions, and then we've also done kind of multiple stories. So last year, for example, at Medicaid conference, we did a whole vignette around the mother and his family, and then we turned around and did a whole another vignette around the child to demonstrate different aspects of kind of what's happening to this one family. Does that make sense?
Right.
Yeah. So we have a lot of flexibility. We can make this into what we want it to be. It's relevant and meaningful for everybody.
So I guess that's part of the question for the group here is, there was I think we threw out the idea of, or introduced the idea of education, health, and housing as the sort of the pillars upon which to build this proof of concept. Does that, I think that what, will be important to, pick the domains that are going to be, representative or compelling to people who are on the call here or are going to be involved with that. Is there, I guess I could ask it in both in a positive or negative way, is, does that meet everybody's, if we could demonstrate that, would that meet everybody's interests? Or are there things that need to be included that we haven't spoken about yet that should be considered? Especially
This is Eric. Those three domains are good, but I think there's two things to prove. You need to prove that the three domains can be connected and be interoperable. And you also need to prove that you could, with the same model, add a fourth domain.
Yeah.
Without having to do something special.
Yeah. Actually, would it be helpful as one of the, I guess you call it a fourth domain that might be relevant here, would be juvenile justice?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm thinking.
And if for no other reason, because I think they have some developed body of work around the NIC data exchanges in that area, and it's fairly simple from the I guess the curated information that we already have. It's pretty simple to throw that in there, just because we've already got a kid who's exposed to adverse childhood experiences, asthma in the home, etc. And if somebody mentioned the absenteeism issue earlier, if that child, we know adverse childhood experiences like that, and actually, if I remember right, the kid, we also put the child into a child protective situation, where he's got a guardian ad litem already, and is in foster home. So adding the juvenile justice element would be fairly simple from there.
So
and also from a story standpoint, not from a technical standpoint.
I wasn't suggesting that you had to really actually do a fourth domain, but just put out there the information that additional domains, whatever they are, could be added. That way that people who aren't affiliated with the domains we're demonstrating can feel part of it, because they would have hope that their domain could be added easily.
Right, and that's the nature of what we would add to the proof of concept would be to show that happening, right? That would be the best way to how that.
Yeah, yeah.
Because the story, we started the story in a certain place, and probably best to start where we ended off last year. And then, you know, things happen, juvenile justice is involved, and, you know, part of the demo is showing that now we've got data exchange in that area, and we're leveraging the tools and addressing the issues, right? So we're addressing identity management, we're addressing the consent, we're addressing the cross-domain, you know, multiple standards, data exchange issues as we go through.
So it's the opportunity to expand upon it, so expand upon the use case, and also to demonstrate the flexibility of adding additional domains.
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great point. Yep. We can start with the basic building blocks and show that, I mean, we could flex it with the additional domains. And that will again hit the point that Naresh had made earlier, which is the data governance in different ways. I think that would be an interesting dynamic for the proof of concept.
Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for all the great comments.
So Daniel, can you go forward one slide? So one of the things that I'm really open to starting to collect the ideas, but I think one of the things that we need to do is have a catalog of services. So I'm sorry, Daniel, one more slide would be great. I hope it's
That'll
there.
cost you, Dave. All right, there you go.
Okay, so to develop a catalog of services or a catalog of domains, and it may start out pretty primitive, but it would make a lot of sense to start to enumerate what we think the domains could be. And I know that if you look at them broadly, there may not be that many, but then if you look at them specifically, such as this domain is almost like that one, but with these differences, it could multiply to many, many domains. But one of the things that makes sense to me, and I'm really interested in hearing other people's opinions, is to start to enumerate the domains, list out, it could be as simple as a spreadsheet initially, what those services are in that domain, what an endpoint is. And I don't want to get all too technical right here, but the endpoint is fundamentally the URL or URI that you call to get information. And then the big one is the data model for exchanging information with those domains. So criminal justice as an example, or you know, there's a lot of work that's already occurring in the HIE and EHR, the clinical information. I don't think we need to focus on that too much. There's many, many heads that are working on that one. But other domains that could be criminal justice or a CPO or another domain is just to start to enumerate what those first domains are like, so we could build a proof of concept using those very primitive domains initially. So I'm reaching out at this point, trying to see if anybody's got any thoughts, like Elliot in education. What are the data models that actually need to flow in the education K-12 domains, or Marceline?
Well, I'm not sure. Marcia, are you on still, or Elliot? They may not be on at this point in time. We do lose people around the 1 o'clock hour. You know what? I'm sorry. Want to comment?
Marcel is still on. I think she might be muted.
Okay. Dave, I'm just thinking we're at 1:20 now. I'm thinking about first of all, answering any questions. Jane has a question here on the chat about the domains. But the other question is, how do we want to proceed? Because I think we've been sort of circling around the domains, the different sort of the catalog as you've outlined here. And I want to be a little pragmatic for people who want to, how do we actually move this forward, right? I think there's interest, there's energy, there's value, there's applicability, there's replicability, all those things that I think are relevant to the POC. And so one suggestion would be, let me just put it out there, is that at next week's call, maybe there's some work that happens between now and then that sort of articulates this a little in some language. I know you guys have been working on that to define what the POC might be. And then for people who are interested in either actively engaging in it, and actually contributing to it, or those people who want to sort of, I guess, consult to it, may not have the time or the energy right now, but want to be involved, could actually spend next week's call on that in order to sort of move some concrete steps next in terms of how people can participate, what kind of activities are going to be anticipated, the kind of some time commitments, some work in between, reporting, those kinds of things.
Yeah. Daniel, this is Tom. One thing that I might suggest if we want to do that next week is if folks on the phone are kind of happy with the discussion that we've had here today, that maybe we'll memorialize that in a document and get that out to folks. I mean, I can take a stab at that, and I've been taking some notes here.
Great.
And send that out so we have something to work from as opposed to just sort of, envisioning it. We can tear it apart, put it back together, add things, delete things in the next call. Does that make sense?
And Tom?
That would be wonderful to have something concrete so that we're not constantly just talking around in a circle.
Right. If this sounds like the good bones, what we've talked about today is good bones for recipes, and we can start here and work our way up.
And Tom, this is Pradeep. I'm also taking some notes. I'll start typing it as well. So once you have your document, I will integrate it, and then we can share it with everyone, if that is okay.
Yeah. Okay. Sounds good.
So
absolutely.
That's great. So for folks who may or may not be on the computer, I just put up on the screen the page for the Let's Get Technical group on the hub. And here we have a variety of places to sort of post that. In this particular section here, it's just about the group as you've gone on to it. So there's the past calls, there's some future discussion topics. What we can do is we can either start a discussion in the forum. So if I go to the forum right now, what we can do is, these are just discussions that have been happening, and or we can post it as a resource as well. So maybe between the folks who are going to gather sort of between now and then, we can post that, and then that will be a document that people can respond to. And it'll be online, so it's easy as opposed to emailing it around everybody. That might be a good way to go. And then we can point people to that before the call next.
Okay.
That sounds good to me. And the point here, Eric and Mary Sarah, I see both of you being able to bring something to the party. Eric may bring more real world questions. How do we do this? How do we do that? And so forth, to relate to his project. And Mary Sarah may be able to bring experiences that you've encountered in your efforts to do this as well. So I think there's going to be a lot of learning done, not just about the domain itself, but about the technologies that need to be in place for security and so forth.
Yeah. Actually, Dave, I don't know if we got an answer to, I don't know if it was your question or I forget if somebody else asked it, just on the element of education that we want in this. You mentioned something about K through 12, but are we going to stick with like school nurse scenario, or do we want to go somewhere else with that?
Yeah, what I'd like to do is reach out to Elliot and get her involved in the conversation. I'm not sure.
K-12. We would love to do K-12.
And that was Marcelly?
Yes, I work with her.
Great. Super. They're the experts
Right.
on that, Tom. So we'll get them.
Yeah, just let me know. I mean, we've got a school nurse in the mix right now, but if we want to do some other aspect of K through 12 that, data sharing, then just let me know and we'll add it.
Sounds good. Okay, Daniel, the clock's running out.
Yeah. So just to recap, there'll be a couple of folks will put together a kind of a thought piece. We'll post that on the forum here for people to look at, potentially respond to, and then we'll set up a meeting on the meeting event notification. We'll identify that this is to be another working session for people who want to commit to it and those people who want to support and consult to it. So we'll stay focused on this for next week. We'll make that clear to folks. So what we're using the time for, and ideally we'll have some slides that will help people dive into some more of the details on some of the topics we've talked about, the technical, legal components of it, and start to get a bit of a work plan here. Great. Does that make sense? And then just to point out, the following week, Paul will be talking about criminal justice and public safety. So I think he'll be on, I think he's back from out of town. So we'll actually be able to sort of overlay some of that learning as well as some of the NEAM work on top of that. So if that makes sense to folks, that'll be terrific. If we can use the resource here effectively, that'll be great. And as I mentioned, there's on here, there's the members. All the members are participating here, so you can either directly message people there if you want to get their email, or you want to get their contact information, or you want to just send them a note. You can find that on the member site here, and we'll go from there. Any other questions before we sign off for this afternoon, or comments?
I think we have a plan. Yep. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for both preparing and then contributing today and participating. We look forward to the POC and the ongoing work as this proceeds. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Bye.
you,
Bye, everybody. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Thank you.